The blood on her wedding dress wasn't hers. It belonged to the 3 men her father had sent to drag her back to the church, and the creatures standing over their bodies wore a smile that promised both damnation and salvation in equal measure. Wait, before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. Celeste Thorne had been running for 3 hours through the Blackwood Forest. Her ivory gown, meant for a marriage she would never consent to, now torn and muddied beyond recognition. The pre-dawn darkness had been her ally until her father's hunters found her at the creek. She'd fought, screamed, clawed at their faces, but Father Dominic Thorne had chosen his most loyal enforcers, men who believed they were doing God's work by returning the priest's rebellious daughter to her destiny. Then he appeared. The vampire moved like smoke given form, materializing between Celeste and her captors with an inhuman grace that defied the laws of nature. She'd heard stories all her life. Her father's sermons were filled with warnings about the eternal ones who dwelled in the mountains, creatures of unholy thirst who preyed upon the faithful. But nothing had prepared her for the terrible beauty of Lord Lucian Ashcroft, whose pale features seemed carved from moonlight itself, whose eyes burned with an ancient crimson fire that saw straight through to her terrified soul. The fight, if it could be called that, lasted seconds. The hunters were trained men, hardened by years of tracking heretics and supernatural threats for the church. Against Lucian, they were children playing with wooden swords. He moved through them like a winter wind, and when he finished, the only sounds were Celeste's ragged breathing and the gentle dripping of blood from his fingertips onto the moss-covered ground. "You were running from a wedding," Lucian said, his voice like velvet over steel. It wasn't a question. His gaze traveled over her dress, taking in every detail with an assessment that felt uncomfortably intimate. How inconvenient for everyone involved. Celeste's throat had gone dry, but she forced herself to stand straight, to meet those impossible eyes. 23 years of being Father Dominic's daughter had taught her one crucial lesson: never show fear to predators, human or otherwise. "Are you going to kill me too?" A slow smile curved his lips, revealing the barest hint of fangs. "That depends entirely on what you're worth alive, Celeste Thorne." The sound of her name from his mouth sent ice down her spine. "How do you know who you are?" Lucian stepped over one of the bodies, moving closer with predatory intent. "Your father has been quite vocal about his wayward daughter who refuses to accept her sacred duty. The whole region knows that Father Dominic intends to marry you to Bishop Aldrich Corvine to cement a political alliance that will expand the church's influence into the Northern Territories." He tilted his head, studying her with unsettling focus. "They also know you'd rather die than warm that particular snake's bed." "Then you understand why I ran." Celeste's hands trembled, but she kept them at her sides, refusing to show weakness. Dawn was perhaps an hour away. She could see the faintest lightening of the sky through the trees. Everyone knew vampires couldn't survive sunlight. If she could just keep him talking. "I understand desperation," Lucian said softly, and for a moment something almost human flickered across his features. "I understand the lengths one will go to escape a future that feels like a coffin closing over your still-living body." He moved with that impossible speed again, and suddenly he was close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his skin. Which is why I'm going to make you an offer your father will find devastating. Celeste's heart hammered against her ribs. What kind of offer? The kind that saves your life and serves my purposes. Lucian's eyes gleamed with dark amusement. You see, your father has something I want. A manuscript hidden in his private study that contains information about my family, information that could be used to destroy what's left of my bloodline. He's been using it as leverage against my kind for years, preventing us from reclaiming lands that belonged to the Ashcrofts long before his precious church planted its roots here. So you want me to steal it for you? The pieces clicked together in Celeste's mind with sickening clarity. That's why you were here. You were waiting for me. Actually, I was hunting deer. Lucian's smile widened. But when I caught your scent, terror and orange blossoms, quite a memorable combination, and realized whose blood ran through your veins, I decided to follow. Your father's hunters were simply an unfortunate complication that required resolution. He gestured casually at the bodies. But yes, now that we've been so dramatically introduced, I find the opportunity too perfect to waste. And if I refuse? Celeste knew the answer before she asked, but she needed to hear him say it. Then I leave you here, and when your father's next group of hunters finds you beside these corpses, covered in their blood, they'll assume you've been possessed or corrupted by dark forces. Lucian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You'll be dragged back in chains, exorcised until you confess to crimes you didn't commit, and then married off to Bishop Corvain anyway, if you survive the church's tender mercies. I've seen your father's work, Celeste.
He's not known for his gentleness with supposed heretics, even when they're his own flesh and blood. The truth of his words hit like a physical blow. Father Dominic's reputation as an interrogator was legendary and terrifying. She'd witnessed his cold fury often enough to know that love, if he'd ever felt any for her, had long since been consumed by his obsession with holy duty and political power. To him, she was a piece on a chessboard, nothing more. "What exactly would you want me to do?" she asked, hating the defeat that crept into her voice. Lucian's expression shifted, becoming almost businesslike. "Return to your father's house. Play the repentant daughter. Tell him you were overcome by wedding nerves, that you wandered into the forest to pray and got lost. His hunters will be presumed killed by bandits or wolves. Tragic, but not uncommon in these woods. You'll have perhaps a week before the wedding, during which time you'll find the manuscript and bring it to me. And then I disappear, and you'll be free to run again, this time with enough gold to start a new life somewhere far from your father's reach. I'll even provide safe passage to the coast. There are ships that sail to the New World weekly. You could be someone else entirely within a month." It was everything Celeste had dreamed of during her years of suffocating under Father Dominic's rigid control. Freedom, choice, a life that belonged to her rather than to the church's political machinations. But the price? "You'd be trusting me not to betray you," she said carefully. "How do you know I won't go straight to my father and tell him everything?" Lucian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Because, my dear desperate girl, I know fear and I know pride. You fear your father more than you fear me, and your pride won't allow you to crawl back to him admitting you need his protection from a monster." More importantly, his hand shot out faster than thought, and his fingers wrapped around her wrist with gentle but unmistakable strength. "I can find you anywhere now. I've touched you, tasted your fear on the air around you. Your blood sings to me like a beacon. If you betray me, I'll come for you, and no church walls will keep me out." The threat should have terrified her.
Instead, Celeste felt a strange rush of something almost like exhilaration. For the first time in her life, someone was treating her like an equal player in a dangerous game, rather than a pawn to be moved at will. Lucian's threat was honest, direct, so different from her father's manipulation wrapped in scripture and false love. "1 week," she said. "I'll need at least that long to find the manuscript and copy it without him noticing." "Copy it?" Lucian raised an eyebrow. "I won't give you the original. If it's your only leverage against my father, then once you have it, I become expendable. But a copy?" Celeste met his gaze steadily, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. "A copy gives you what you need while ensuring I remain valuable enough to keep alive." For a long moment, Lucian simply stared at her, and Celeste wondered if she'd overplayed her hand. Then he threw back his head and laughed, the sound echoing through the forest like music from another world. "Brilliant," he said, genuine appreciation warming his voice. "Your father is a fool if he thinks you're merely an asset to be traded." "Very well, Celeste Thorne. Copy the manuscript. But understand this. If you attempt to deceive me, if the copy is incomplete or falsified, our agreement is void, and you'll discover exactly how creative an immortal can be with vengeance." "Understood." Celeste pulled her wrist free, and he let her go without resistance. "Where do I find you when it's done?" "There's an abandoned chapel 3 miles north of your father's estate, near the old quarry. Come at midnight, any night. I'll know you're there."
Lucian glanced at the sky, where pink was beginning to stain the edges of darkness. Dawn is coming. You need to start walking back. You'll want to arrive looking appropriately lost and exhausted. And Celeste, he caught her eyes one final time. "Clean the blood off your hands before you reach the house." She looked down and realized her palms were indeed stained with blood, from falling, from fighting the hunters, from the horror of watching them die. Evidence that would doom her if seen. "There's a stream a 1/4 mile south. Wash quickly and start home." Lucian was already moving backward, deeper into the shadows. "1 week, little priest's daughter. Don't make me come hunting for you." Then he was gone, vanished so completely it was as if he'd never existed. Only the bodies remained as proof that the last hour hadn't been some fever dream born of panic and exhaustion. Celeste ran. The Church of Sacred Light stood at the center of Thornwood like a stone fist, its spire piercing the sky in what Father Dominic called a blade aimed at heaven's heart, ready to strike down sin. Celeste had always thought it looked more like a prison, its windows narrow as accusations, its walls thick enough to muffle screams. She reached the priest's residence, attached to the church like a tumor, just as full dawn broke. Her story was ready, practiced in her mind during the long walk home. She'd panicked about the wedding, run into the forest to pray, gotten lost in the darkness. Simple, plausible, the kind of feminine weakness her father expected from her. The front door crashed open before she could reach it. Father Dominic Thorne filled the doorway, his gaunt frame somehow massive with rage. At 53, he was all sharp angles and sharper judgments, his face carved by years of righteous fury into something barely recognizable as human. His priest's robes hung on him like burial shrouds, and his eyes, the same green as Celeste's own, burned with holy fire. Celeste Maria Thorne. Her full name was a curse in his mouth. "Do you have any conception of what you've done?" "Father, Silence. His hand cracked across her face before she could finish, snapping her head to the side. Pain exploded across her cheekbone, but Celeste had learned long ago not to cry. Tears only made him angrier. "You ran away on the eve of your wedding. You humiliated me before Bishop Corvain, before the entire congregation, before God himself.
I sent 3 of my best men to find you, and they haven't returned. If they've come to harm because of your sinful rebellion, I'm sorry. The words tasted like ash. I was afraid. The marriage, it's all happening so fast, and I just needed time to pray, to prepare myself spiritually. You needed nothing but obedience. Father Dominic grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. I have given you everything: shelter, food, education far beyond what any mere girl deserves. And this is how you repay me? With defiance? With sin? He dragged her inside, through the austere hallway with its crucifixes and icons of suffering saints, into his study. The room smelled of old books and older wine, its walls lined with theological texts and ecclesiastical records. This was the heart of his power, where he planned his sermons and his political maneuvers with equal fervor. "You will marry Bishop Corvain in 3 days," Father Dominic said, releasing her so violently she stumbled. 3 days? Celeste's carefully constructed composure cracked. "Father, please, that's not enough time." "For what? More prayer? More childish rebellion?" He moved to his desk, pouring himself wine with hands that trembled slightly, the only sign that he was perhaps not as controlled as he appeared. "You are 23 years old, Celeste, past the age when most women are already mothers." Bishop Corvain is showing you extraordinary kindness by accepting you despite your difficulties. Difficulties, as if her resistance to being sold like livestock was a character flaw rather than the natural response of someone with a functioning mind. "I'll do my duty," Celeste said quietly, lowering her eyes in what she hoped looked like submission. "I'm sorry I caused trouble. The wedding nerves, they overwhelmed me. It won't happen again." Father Dominic studied her suspiciously, clearly not trusting this sudden acquiescence. "You'll stay in your room until the ceremony. Sister Agnes will bring your meals and ensure you don't attempt any further acts of rebellion. You'll spend the time in prayer and contemplation of your sins." "Yes, Father. And if you ever embarrass me like this again, I'll have you sent to the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy." The threat landed like a blade against her throat. The sisters were known for their brutal methods of correcting wayward women. Girls went into their care and came out hollow-eyed and broken, if they came out at all. "Do you understand me?" "Yes, Father. And if you ever embarrass me like this again, I'll have you sent to the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy." The threat landed like a blade against her throat. The sisters were known for their brutal methods of correcting wayward women. Girls went into their care and came out hollow-eyed and broken, if they came out at all. "Do you understand me?" "Yes, Father." "Get out of my sight." Celeste fled to her room, her heart pounding. 3 days. She'd told Lucien she needed a week, but now she had 3 days to find the manuscript, copy it, and escape to the abandoned chapel without being caught. It was impossible, but the alternative was Bishop Corvain. She'd met him once, 2 months ago, when he'd come to discuss the arrangement with her father. Aldrich Corvain was 61 years old, had buried 3 wives already, and looked at Celeste the way her father looked at wine, as something to be consumed for personal pleasure, then discarded when it no longer served a purpose. His hands, when he'd touched her arm in greeting, had been damp and possessive. The thought of those hands on her, night after night, for the rest of whatever miserable life awaited her, made Celeste's skin crawl. No, she'd made her choice in the forest. She would find that manuscript, strike her bargain with the vampire lord, and flee to a future that was hers to shape, even if it meant dancing with monsters. Her room was small, barely 10 feet square, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that overlooked the cemetery behind the church. Celeste had spent countless hours staring out that window, watching the gravestones and wondering if that was all life held, waiting for death in whatever form God and Father Dominic deemed appropriate. Not anymore. She waited until evening, until she heard Sister Agnes' shuffling footsteps bring dinner, thin soup and hard bread, the same meal she'd eaten almost every day of her life. The elderly nun said nothing, simply left the tray and locked the door behind her with a decisive click. Celeste ate mechanically, her mind racing. The manuscript would be in Father Dominic's study, that much was certain. He kept everything important there, locked in the massive oak cabinet behind his desk. She'd seen him access it before, using a key he wore on a chain around his neck, tucked beneath his robes. Getting into the study wouldn't be difficult. Father Dominic retired late, often working until midnight on his correspondence and sermon preparations. But once he went to bed, he slept like the dead, especially on nights when he'd indulged heavily in wine. And tonight, stressed by her disappearance and return, he'd likely drink more than usual. The key was the problem. She'd have to get it off of him while he slept, which meant entering his bedroom, standing close enough to lift it from around his neck without waking him. The thought made her stomach turn, but there was no alternative. She'd been brave enough to face a vampire in the forest. She could be brave enough for this. Time crawled. Celeste changed out of her ruined wedding dress into a simple dark shift, then waited in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the household settling into sleep. Sister Agnes' snoring started around 10 o'clock, a rattling sound that carried through the thin walls. Her father's study light, visible as a thin line beneath her door when he walked past in the hallway, finally went dark around midnight. Celeste gave it another hour, counting heartbeats, before she carefully picked the lock on her door. It was a skill she'd taught herself years ago, using a hairpin and patience born of desperation. The mechanism clicked softly, and she eased the door open, praying the hinges wouldn't squeak. The hallway was dark, lit only by the faint moonlight filtering through the high windows. Celeste moved like a ghost, barefoot, her breathing controlled. She'd mapped every creaking floorboard in this house over 2 decades. She knew exactly where to step. Her father's bedroom was at the end of the hall, his door slightly ajar as always. He claimed it allowed him to hear if anyone needed spiritual guidance in the night, but Celeste suspected it was really about maintaining control even in sleep. She pushed it open with agonizing slowness. Father Dominic lay in his narrow bed, still dressed in his robes, one arm flung across his face. Empty wine bottles on his nightstand confirmed he'd drunk himself into oblivion. His breathing was deep and regular, occasionally punctuated by small snoring sounds. Celeste approached the bed with her heart hammering so loud she was certain it would wake him. The keys chain was visible at his collar, the metal glinting dully in the moonlight streaming through his window. She reached out with trembling fingers, grasped the chain gently, and began to lift. Inch by inch, the chain slid over his chest. The key itself was still tucked beneath the fabric of his robe. She'd have to reach into his collar to extract it. Her fingers touched the cold metal just as Father Dominic stirred. Celeste froze, barely breathing, the key half extracted. His arm moved, lowering from his face, and for one terrible moment she thought his eyes were opening. But then he simply rolled onto his side, turning away from her, and the movement pulled the chain free. She stood there clutching the key, not daring to move for a full minute, waiting to see if he'd wake. When his snoring resumed, she finally backed away, the key burning in her palm like stolen fire. The study door was locked, but the key fit perfectly.
Inside, lit only by moonlight, the room seemed different, more ominous, as if the shadows themselves were watching. Celeste moved to the cabinet behind the desk, using the same key to open it. The cabinet was filled with documents, parish records, correspondence with church officials, financial ledgers. But on the middle shelf, locked in a small iron box with its own separate lock, was something wrapped in black cloth. The box's lock was different, more complex. Celeste had brought her hairpins, and she worked at it with fingers made clumsy by fear and urgency. Minutes ticked past. Her neck prickled with the constant terror that Father Dominic would wake, would find her here, would... Click. The lock gave way. Inside the box, the black cloth concealed a leather-bound book, old and cracked, its pages yellowed with age. Celeste unwrapped it carefully and opened to the first page. The Ashcroft Bloodline, a complete history of their sins, weaknesses, and methods of extermination. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just information, this was a murder manual. Page after page detailed the Ashcroft family's history, their supernatural abilities, their vulnerabilities, the locations of their ancestral crypts, even the names of their living descendants and where they could be found. Lucian had been right to want this destroyed. In the wrong hands, or rather, in her father's hands, this book was a death sentence for his entire bloodline.
And there, on a page marked with a blood-red ribbon, was an entry that made Celeste's heart stop. Lucian Ashcroft, Lord of the Northern Bloodline. Last confirmed location, Ashcroft Manor, Blackwood Mountains. Known weaknesses: silver blessed by sacred rites, direct sunlight, removal of the heart. Estimated age, 347 years. Threat level, extreme. Recommended action, coordinated strike on ancestral manor using blessed silver and holy fire. Probability of success, 78%. Her father had been planning to kill Lucian. This wasn't just leverage, it was reconnaissance for an attack. Celeste's hands shook as she turned through more pages, finding similar entries for other vampires, all meticulously researched, all marked with kill strategies and success probabilities. How many had her father already murdered using this information? She needed to copy this, but there were hundreds of pages. She'd never be able to transcribe it all in the time she had. Instead, she made a decision that would bind her fate to Lucian's more thoroughly than any bargain. She'd take the original and leave Father Dominic to believe it was still safely locked away. Celeste wrapped the book back in its black cloth and tucked it inside her shift, binding it against her body with strips of fabric torn from her hem. Then she carefully reassembled the box, locked it, closed the cabinet, and locked that as well. Returning the key to Father Dominic's neck was even more terrifying than stealing it had been. He'd shifted position again, now lying on his back, one hand resting on his chest exactly where the chain needed to go. Celeste had to lift his hand, slide the chain beneath it, and arrange it to look naturally fallen. She did it with her breath held and her eyes squeezed half shut, certain that any second he'd wake and catch her. But the wine had done its work too well. He slept on, oblivious. Back in her room, with the door locked behind her, Celeste finally allowed herself to shake. She'd done it. She actually had the manuscript. Now she just needed to survive the next 3 days without arousing suspicion, then escape to the chapel and complete her bargain with Lucian. But as she lay in bed with the stolen book pressed against her heart, she couldn't help wondering, what exactly had she just set in motion? And when Lucian discovered she'd brought him the original instead of a copy, would he consider it a gift or a threat? Dawn came too quickly, bringing with it Sister Agnes and another meager breakfast. Celeste played the role of the penitent daughter perfectly, head bowed, voice soft, agreeing to spend the day in prayer and reflection. The elderly nun seemed satisfied, even going so far to pat Celeste's hand and murmur something about God's plan for all his children. If only she knew what plans Celeste was making. The second day passed in agonizing slowness. Celeste prayed, real prayers this time, not to God, but to whatever forces governed luck and survival. That Father Dominic wouldn't check his cabinet. Every footstep in the hall made her tense, expecting discovery. But the house remained quiet. Father Dominic was busy with wedding preparations, and Sister Agnes seemed content to leave Celeste to her supposed spiritual contemplation. It was on the third day, the day before her now imminent wedding, that everything changed. Father Dominic came to her room in the afternoon, his face pale, his hands trembling. "We have visitors," he said, his voice strained. "Important visitors. You will come down, you will be presented, and you will speak only when spoken to. Do you understand?" "Yes, Father." Celeste's stomach nodded. "Who—" "Bishop Corvain has arrived early with members of the church council. They've come to ensure the wedding proceeds without further complications." His eyes were wild, desperate in a way she'd never seen before. "The council is conducting an investigation into supernatural activity in the region." There have been reports of vampire attacks near Thornwood. They believe there may be a nest in the mountains. Celeste's blood turned to ice. A nest? The Ashcrofts. Father Dominic spat the name like a curse. Creatures who have plagued this region for centuries. But the council has new methods, new intelligence. They intend to wipe them out completely within the week. He grabbed her arm. "This is a great honor, Celeste. Your wedding to Bishop Corvain will coincide with the greatest triumph of the church in decades, the complete eradication of the vampire scourge." The book pressed against her skin felt like it was burning. Her father's intelligence. The manuscript she'd stolen was the key to the church's planned attack on Lucian and his family. And she had 3 hours until midnight when she was supposed to deliver it to the vampire lord himself. The meeting with Bishop Corvain and the church council was a nightmare dressed in polite conversation. Celeste sat in the formal parlor wearing a modest dress Sister Agnes had laid out, her hands folded in her lap, the stolen manuscript hidden beneath layers of fabric and terror. Bishop Aldrich Corvain was exactly as she remembered, soft around the middle, hard in the eyes, with the kind of smile that never reached beyond his teeth. He sat beside her on the settee, close enough that his thigh pressed against hers, and spoke about their upcoming marriage as if it were already a fait accompli. "I've arranged for your rooms at the bishop's palace to be redecorated in softer colors," he said, his damp hand covering hers. "I understand young wives prefer delicate surroundings. Of course, you'll have duties as a bishop's wife, entertaining church dignitaries, organizing charitable events, but I'm sure your father has prepared you adequately." "Most adequately," Father Dominic said from across the room where he stood with 3 other council members, all of them austere men in dark robes, who watched Celeste like birds of prey assessing a field mouse. "We're pleased to see Father Dominic's daughter has recovered from her episode," one of them said. Father Sebastian, if Celeste remembered correctly, a thin man with the eyes of an inquisitor. "Nervous brides are understandable, but running into the Blackwood Forest shows remarkably poor judgment. Those woods are dangerous, even for men with weapons." "I know," Celeste said softly, playing her role. "I wasn't thinking clearly. The wedding preparations, they overwhelmed me. I'm grateful my father's hunters were searching for me." "About those hunters," Father Sebastian leaned forward. "Your father mentioned they haven't returned. 3 trained men, simply vanished. You didn't see them in the forest?" "No, Father. I was lost, confused. I saw no one until I found my way back. Interesting. His gaze was sharp, cutting. The same night 3 men disappear, we receive reports of unusual activity near the old quarry chapel. Lights moving in the darkness. Sounds like screaming. Celeste's heart stopped, but she kept her expression blank, confused. I don't understand what that has to do with me. Perhaps nothing, Father Sebastian said. Or perhaps the vampires are growing bolder, striking closer to town. Which is why we've accelerated our plans. Tomorrow, immediately after your wedding, we march on Ashcroft Manor with 50 armed men, blessed silver and holy fire. The Ashcroft bloodline ends at dawn. All of them? Celeste couldn't stop the question. Bishop Corvain chuckled, squeezing her hand. Such a tender heart. Don't worry, my dear. They're not human, no matter how human they appear. They're demons wearing stolen flesh, and God commands their destruction. Your father's research has given us everything we need to finally cleanse this region of their evil. The research currently pressed against Celeste's ribs, damning her with every heartbeat. The meeting lasted another hour, filled with talk of wedding details and military strategy in equal measure. Celeste smiled and nodded and spoke when required, all while calculating her chances of escape. The house would be closely watched now, with the council members staying as guests and additional guards posted around the perimeter for protection. Getting to the chapel at midnight would be impossible, unless she didn't wait for midnight. That evening, as Sister Agnes brought dinner, Celeste pretended to stumble, knocking the tray to the floor. The elderly nun bent to clean up the mess, and Celeste apologized profusely while palming the key to her room from the nun's belt. Later, as the house settled into sleep, though Celeste suspected more people were awake and alert than usual, given the council's presence, she unlocked her door and moved through the hallway like smoke, avoiding the main corridors where guards were stationed, using servants' passages she'd explored as a curious child. The kitchen door was locked but not guarded. She picked it in seconds and slipped into the night. The abandoned chapel was 3 miles north, through fields and forest, in darkness broken only by a sliver of moon. Celeste ran, the manuscript clutched to her chest, her lungs burning, terror and desperation lending her speed. She burst into the chapel's ruins just after 10 o'clock, startling a family of owls who'd made their home in the broken rafters. "Lucian!" Her voice echoed in the empty space. "Lucian Ashcroft, I know you can hear me. I need to speak with you now." Silence answered. Then, like a candle flame appearing in darkness, he was there. Lucian stepped from the shadows at the far end of the chapel, his pale features ghostly in the dim light. "You're early," he observed, moving toward her with that fluid, predatory grace. And panicked. "What's happened?" "Everything." Celeste thrust the wrapped manuscript at him. "This is what my father had. Not a copy, the original. And you need to read it now, because tomorrow at dawn, the church is attacking your home with 50 armed men. They know your weaknesses, they know where you sleep, they know everything." Lucian's expression went deadly still. He took the manuscript, unwrapping it with careful hands, and began to read. Celeste watched emotions flicker across his face. Surprise, anger, a deep, ancient weariness. 300 years, he said softly, turning pages. They've been hunting us for 300 years, documenting our every move, learning our secrets. Your father has the blood of 47 vampires on his hands, using the information in this book. His eyes lifted to hers, burning crimson. "Did you know?" "No, I thought it was just information, leverage." Celeste wrapped her arms around herself. "I didn't know he was planning to kill you all. If I'd known, You'd have what? Warned us sooner? Lucien's laugh was bitter. You were willing to bargain with a monster for your freedom, but mass murder crosses a line? Yes, the word exploded from her. Yes, it crosses a line. Whatever you are, you didn't choose to be born into a vampire bloodline any more than I chose to be born Father Dominic's daughter. The church has no right to exterminate you like animals. How refreshingly progressive. But Lucien's tone had softened slightly. He continued reading, his jaw tightening with each page. They know about the wine cellar entrance, the crypt beneath the east wing, the fact that my sister Evangeline sleeps in the tower room because she loves watching the stars through the skylight, a skylight they plan to shatter at dawn, burning her alive in her own bed. The horror in his voice made Celeste's chest ache. Can you warn them? Get everyone out before tomorrow. Ashcroft Manor has been our home for 5 centuries. This contains not just my family, but artifacts, histories, treasures that represent our entire legacy. We can't simply abandon it. Lucien closed the manuscript with sharp finality. But we can prepare. This book tells them how to kill us, but it also tells me exactly how they plan to attack, which means I can turn their strategy against them. You're going to fight them. It wasn't a question. Did you expect me to run? Lucien's eyes found hers, and in them she saw something ancient and terrible, the predator she'd glimpsed in the forest, magnified 1,000-fold. They're coming to destroy my family, Celeste. Every code I live by, every instinct I possess, demands I protect what's mine. But I won't do it as they expect, charging blindly into their blessed silver and holy fire. He smiled, and it was the most frightening expression she'd ever seen. I'll do it intelligently, strategically, using everything this manuscript tells me about their own tactics and weaknesses. You'll need help, Celeste said, the words escaping before her mind could catch up with her mouth. Someone who knows the church's hierarchy, their command structure, their real vulnerabilities, beyond what's written in that book. Lucien stared at her. You want to help me fight the church? Your father's church? The very people you've lived among your entire life? They're not my people. Celeste's voice was steel. They never were. My father sold me like livestock. Those council members look at me like I'm property. And tomorrow, they're planning to commit mass murder and call it God's work. If helping you stop them makes me a traitor, then I'll wear that title proudly. This isn't a game, Celeste. If you're caught helping me, I'm already caught, she interrupted. Do you think I can go back now? They'll discover the manuscript is missing, probably by morning. They'll know someone warned you when their attack fails. My father will figure it out. He's cruel and obsessive, but he's not stupid. Whether I help you actively or hide in these ruins praying, the result is the same. I'm damned either way, so I might as well be damned doing something that matters. Lucien studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not the predatory expression from before, but something genuine, almost warm. You're absolutely remarkable. Do you know that? Most humans would be begging for mercy or trying to negotiate their survival. You're volunteering for war. I'm volunteering for justice, Celeste corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Lucien moved closer, and this time Celeste didn't flinch. Justice is just revenge dressed in prettier language, and revenge is a vampire's oldest companion. If you help me, Celeste Thorne, you'll have blood on your hands. Not metaphorical blood, real blood, from real people. Some of them might be men you've known your whole life. Can you live with that? Could she? Celeste thought of Father Dominic's cold fury, of Bishop Corvain's damp hands, of the countless times she'd been told her thoughts, her feelings, her very existence didn't matter unless it served the church's purposes. She thought of 3 hunters lying dead in the forest, and how she'd felt almost nothing except relief that they couldn't drag her back. "I can live with it better than I can live as Bishop Corvain's wife," she said quietly. "Better than I can live knowing I stood by while innocent beings were slaughtered. Your family didn't choose what they are, any more than I chose my father. If protecting them requires getting blood on my hands, so be it." "Then we have an alliance." Lucian extended his hand, pale and elegant in the moonlight. A true one this time, not a coerced bargain struck in desperation. Celeste took his hand. His skin was cold, but his grip was firm, solid, more real than any touch she'd received from the supposedly holy men who'd controlled her life. "What do we do first?" "First, we return to Ashcroft Manor and warn my family."
Then we plan. Lucian didn't release her hand, instead tugging her gently toward the chapel's broken doorway. "Can you ride?" "Yes, but I don't have—" "I have horses stabled nearby. Come." They moved through the darkness together, Lucian leading with the confidence of someone who knew these woods intimately. Within minutes, they reached a hidden glen where 2 magnificent horses waited, midnight black, with intelligent eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. "They're beautiful," Celeste breathed. "They're vampire horses," Lucian said, swinging up onto one with fluid ease. "Descended from bloodlines as old as my own. They don't tire, don't spook, and they can run faster than any normal mount." He extended his hand down to her. "We ride together. Hold tight." Celeste grasped his hand and let him pull her up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the unnatural coldness of his body through his clothes, the absolute stillness where a heartbeat should have been. Then they were moving, and she understood what he'd meant about speed. The horse didn't gallop so much as fly, covering ground with impossible swiftness. Trees blurred past, the wind whipped Celeste's hair into tangles, and she clung to Lucian like he was the only solid thing in a world gone fluid. They reached Ashcroft Manor in less than half an hour, a journey that should have taken 2 hours at least. The manor rose from the mountainside like a dark crown, all Gothic spires and ancient stone. Windows glowing with warm light that seemed incongruous given what dwelled within. Lucian dismounted and helped Celeste down, his hand steady on her waist. "Stay close to me," he instructed. "My family will be surprised by your presence. Vampires don't often bring humans home as allies." "Do they bring them home as food?" Celeste asked, then immediately regretted the question. But Lucian just laughed. "Sometimes. But you're under my protection now, which means you're untouchable. Any vampire who harms you answers to me, and I'm not known for my mercy with family members who break my rules." He kept one hand on the small of her back as he guided her toward the massive front doors. "Just let me do the talking initially. My family can be dramatic." The doors swung open before they reached them, revealing a woman who made Celeste's breath catch. She was perhaps the most beautiful creature Celeste had ever seen, tall and willowy, with silver blonde hair that cascaded past her waist and eyes like liquid mercury. She wore a gown that seemed woven from moonlight itself, and her presence radiated both elegance and danger in equal measure. "Lucian," the woman said, her voice musical but edged with concern. "You're back early, and you've brought a human. Has something happened?" "Everything, Evangeline." Lucian moved past his sister. It had to be his sister, the one who slept in the tower room watching stars, pulling Celeste with him into an entrance hall that took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, marble floors gleamed in the candlelight, and tapestries depicting centuries of history covered the walls. "Call everyone to the council chamber. We have perhaps 8 hours before we're under attack, and we need to prepare." Evangeline's beautiful face went cold and hard. The church? Led by Father Dominic Thorne and backed by the church council. 50 armed men with blessed silver, holy fire, and complete intelligence on our weaknesses and defenses. They know about the wine cellar entrance, the crypt, even your tower room skylight. That's impossible. We've been so careful. Evangeline stopped, her mercurial eyes finding Celeste. Her. She warned me, Lucian corrected sharply. If not for Celeste's courage, we'd be sleeping peacefully while an army assembled to burn us alive in our beds. Show her the respect she's earned. For a long moment, the two vampires stared at each other, some wordless sibling communication passing between them. Then Evangeline inclined her head gracefully. "Forgive my rudeness. Any human brave enough to betray her own kind for our sake deserves courtesy at minimum." She turned to Celeste directly. "Evangeline Ashcroft, welcome to our home, Celeste Thorne, even if you've brought war with you." "I didn't bring it," Celeste said, finding her voice despite her awe at the surroundings. "I just gave you warning before it arrived." A slow smile curved Evangeline's lips. "Clever distinction. I like her, Lucian. She can stay." Then she was moving, gliding up a grand staircase with supernatural grace. "I'll gather the family. This should be an interesting conversation." Lucian guided Celeste through the manor's halls, each room more magnificent than the last. They passed a library that seemed to stretch forever, its shelves filled with books spanning centuries. A portrait gallery where painted Ashcrofts watched with knowing eyes. A ballroom with floors so polished they reflected like mirrors. "This is where you live?" Celeste couldn't help her amazement. "It's like a palace." "It's been our home for 500 years, Lucian said, and there was sadness beneath his words. "Every generation has added something, a wing, a garden, a collection. It's not just a building, Celeste. It's a living record of my family's existence. Proof that we're more than the monsters your father's church claims we are." "I can see that," Celeste said softly. "Anyone who looks at this place and sees only evil is willfully blind." They reached a large chamber dominated by a circular table carved from a single massive piece of black wood. Chairs surrounded it, each one unique and clearly ancient. Lucian led Celeste to a seat, then took his own at the head of the table. Within minutes, the room began to fill. They came in pairs and singles, each vampire a portrait of otherworldly beauty and ancient power. A dark-skinned man with gold eyes and ceremonial scars marking his cheeks. "Dominic, my cousin," Lucian murmured. A young-looking woman with red hair and freckles who couldn't have been more than 16 when she was turned. "Marion, my niece." An elderly gentleman with silver hair and a kind face. Uncle Bartholomew, the family historian. There were 12 in all, not counting Lucian and Evangeline. 14 vampires, facing extinction at dawn. "My family," Lucian said once they were all assembled, their eyes fixed on him with varying degrees of confusion, concern, and curiosity. "We have a crisis. The church has planned a coordinated attack on this manor, scheduled for dawn tomorrow. They possess detailed intelligence about our weaknesses, our defenses, and our daily routines. Without warning, we would have been slaughtered in our sleep." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, some demanding details, others calling for immediate evacuation, a few suggesting they strike first. Lucian let the chaos run for a moment, then raised his hand. Silence fell immediately, testament to his authority. "We received warning from an unexpected source." He gestured to Celeste. "This is Celeste Thorne, daughter of Father Dominic Thorne, the man who has been compiling intelligence on our family for decades.
and who leads tomorrow's attack. She stole her father's research and brought it to me at great personal risk. Every vampire eye turned to Celeste. She forced herself to sit straight, to meet their gazes without flinching, even though every instinct screamed that she was a rabbit in a room full of wolves. "She's his daughter?" Dominic's voice was sharp. "And we're supposed to trust her? This could be a trap." "If it's a trap, it's an unnecessarily complex one," Evangeline said from her seat beside Lucien. "Why warn us at all if the goal is to ensure our deaths?" "To make us abandon the manor," suggested Marianne, the young-looking vampire with red hair. "Make us flee into the open, where we're vulnerable, then attack while we're scattered." "I'm not here to trick you," Celeste said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm here because I've spent my entire life watching my father use religion as an excuse for cruelty and control. He was planning to marry me to a man 3 times my age to advance his political power, and when I ran, he sent hunters to drag me back. If Lord Ashcroft hadn't intervened, I'd be married to Bishop Corvin right now, property in all but name. I'm helping you because it's right, and because I'm tired of standing by while terrible things happen in God's name." Uncle Bartholomew leaned forward, his kind face thoughtful. "You're aware that helping us makes you an enemy of the church, that your own father will likely call for your execution." "I'm aware." Celeste's hands trembled slightly in her lap, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm also aware that staying silent would make me complicit in murder. Whatever else I am, I won't be that." "She speaks well," Bartholomew said, nodding. "And her theft of the manuscript shows considerable courage and skill. I vote we trust her, at least provisionally." "As do I," Evangelina added. "Besides, we can verify her information. If the attack doesn't come as she described, we'll know she lied. And if it does come, we'll be grateful for the warning." The debate continued, but gradually the family came around. Some still seemed suspicious. Dominic, in particular, watched Celeste with narrowed eyes. But Lucien's support carried significant weight. "Now," Lucien said, once the question of Celeste's trustworthiness was settled, "we need to plan our defense. The manuscript gives us tremendous advantage. We know exactly how they plan to attack, which means we can prepare appropriate countermeasures." He spread the stolen book open on the table. "They expect to find us sleeping, vulnerable. Instead, we'll be ready. They plan to use the wine cellar entrance. We'll collapse it and fill it with surprises. They intend to shatter Evangeline's skylight. We'll have shutters in place and archers positioned to retaliate. We're going to fight," Dominic said, satisfaction warming his voice. "Good. I'm tired of hiding." "We're going to fight intelligently," Lucien corrected. "This isn't about revenge or proving our strength. It's about survival. We need to break their attack so thoroughly that the church thinks twice before attempting this again." His eyes found Celeste, "which is where you come in. Tell us about the command structure. Who leads? Who are the weak links? What do they fear?" Celeste took a breath, organizing her thoughts. "Bishop Corvine nominally leads, but he's a coward. He'll stay at the rear, directing others forward while keeping himself safe. The real danger is Father Sebastian. He's on the church council, and he's a true believer. He doesn't fear death because he's convinced God will protect him. He'll be at the front, leading the charge." "And your father?" Lucien's voice was carefully neutral. "My father will be with the tactical group, probably in the center. He's not a coward, but he's not reckless either. He'll want to observe, to adjust strategy as needed." Celeste paused. "He's also the one who knows the most about your family from the manuscript. If you eliminate him early, the rest will be working blind." "You're suggesting we kill your father." It wasn't a question. Celeste met Lucien's eyes. I'm suggesting he's a strategic target. What you do with that information is your choice. Something inside her chest felt like it was cracking, but she kept her voice steady. I won't pretend I love him. He's made my life a prison. But I also won't pretend I'm comfortable with patricide. So I'm telling you the tactical reality and letting you make the decision. Respect flickered across Lucian's features. Fair enough. Well, target the command structure, but attempt to wound rather than kill where possible. Our goal is defense, not massacre. He turned back to the assembled vampires. Here's what we're going to do. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Lucian's family moved with the coordinated efficiency of people who'd fought together before, each one taking on specific tasks. Evangeline organized the fortification of the manor itself, reinforcing doors, positioning defensive weapons, creating fallback positions. Dominic and several others ventured out to set traps along the approaches the church forces would use. Uncle Bartholomew compiled detailed notes on each attacker mentioned in the manuscript, creating profiles of their strengths and weaknesses. And Celeste found herself working alongside Marianne, the young vampire who'd seemed most suspicious of her initially. "You really ran away from your own wedding?" Marianne asked as they carried blessed silver weapons, carefully wrapped to avoid burning vampire skin, down to a secure vault. The vampires planned to use the church's own weapons against them, a piece of irony that made Celeste smile despite the situation. "I did. Would you have married a man you didn't love, who saw you as property?" "I was married once," Marianne said quietly. "In 1847, when I was actually 16. My husband was 43, chosen by my father because he had land and money. He was not kind." She set down her bundle carefully. "I was turned 2 years into that marriage when a vampire attacked our home. My husband tried to use me as a shield. The vampire killed him and offered me a choice, death or undeath. I chose this." She gestured to herself. "178 years later, I've never regretted it." "I'm sorry that happened to you," Celeste said softly. "Don't be. It freed me." Marianne's smile was sharp. "That's why I understand you, even if the others don't. Running from a forced marriage isn't cowardice, it's survival." And if helping us is how you ensure your own freedom, that's practical, not treacherous. They worked in companionable silence after that, and Celeste felt something loosen in her chest. These were supposed to be monsters, demons, creatures without souls. But Marianne had more empathy and understanding in her immortal heart than most humans Celeste had known. Maybe her father had been wrong about more than just her worth. Maybe he'd been wrong about everything. As dawn approached, the real dawn, the one that would bring the church's attack, Lucian gathered everyone in the main hall. The manor had been transformed. Every entrance was fortified, every window shuttered, every corridor turned into a potential trap. The vampires were armed and positioned, and several of them wore special cloaks that would protect them from brief exposure to sunlight, bought from a witch in Prague who specialized in such things. "They'll arrive within the hour," Lucian said, his voice carrying authority. "Remember the plan. We let them commit to their attack, let them think they're succeeding, then we close the trap. No unnecessary killing. Wound and disarm when possible. We're defending our home, not proving we're the monsters they claim we are." His eyes found Celeste, standing near the back. "Celeste, you'll remain in the upper study with Bartholomew. It's the most defensible interior room, and he'll protect you if anyone breaks through." "I can fight," Celeste protested. "I know how to." "You know how to survive in a church, not how to survive a war," Lucian interrupted, but his tone was gentle. "Please, Celeste, you've done enough by warning us. Let us do what we do best."
She wanted to argue, but the pleading in his eyes stopped her. Fine, but if things go wrong, then Bartholomew will get you out through the tunnel system. There's an exit that leads to the northern pass. You'll have horses, supplies, and enough gold to reach the coast.
Lucian hesitated, then crossed the room to stand before her. I need to know you're safe. Is that selfish? Probably, Celeste admitted, but I'll allow it. He smiled, and then, so quickly she barely registered the movement, he leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. It was chaste, almost brotherly, but the coldness of his lips against her skin sent electricity racing through her body. For luck, he murmured, though I don't believe in it. Then he was gone, moving to take his position, leaving Celeste standing frozen with her hand pressed to her forehead where his lips had been. Uncle Bartholomew appeared at her elbow, smiling knowingly. Come, my dear, let's get you somewhere safe, so my nephew can concentrate on the battle instead of worrying about you. The upper study was indeed defensible. Stone walls, a single door that could be barred from inside, and windows positioned to allow observation while minimizing exposure. Bartholomew settled into a chair by the window with a book, seemingly unconcerned by the approaching army. How can you be so calm? Celeste asked, pacing nervously. I'm 843 years old, Bartholomew said mildly. I've seen armies rise and fall, empires crumble, religions transform themselves beyond recognition. This church that hunts us, it's a child compared to the institutions I've watched die. They'll attack, we'll defend, and afterward, the world will continue turning. Getting anxious about it seems rather pointless. But you could die. I could, he agreed. So could you, despite Lucian's precautions. So could everyone in this manner. Death is always possible, my dear. That's what makes life, or unlife in our case, interesting. Before Celeste could respond, a bell began to toll. Deep, resonant, ominous. They're here, Bartholomew said, setting aside his book and moving to the window. Celeste joined him, peering down at the approach to the manor. The sight made her blood run cold. They came in formation, 50 men dressed in black robes over armor, carrying crossbows fitted with silver bolts, torches that burned with unnatural green flame, holy fire, blessed and deadly, and shields marked with religious symbols. Father Sebastian led the front line, his face set with righteous certainty. Bishop Corvain rode in the middle on a white horse, looking uncomfortable but determined. And there, in the tactical center, was Father Dominic. Her father sat straight-backed on his mount, his priest's robes exchanged for practical fighting leathers, a silver blade at his hip. Even from this distance, Celeste could see the cold fury in his face. He'd discovered her gone. He knew she'd betrayed him. Hell never forgive you, Bartholomew observed quietly. You understand that? I know. Celeste's voice was steady despite the pain in her chest. But I'd rather have his hatred than his control. The church forces reached the manor's outer gates and stopped. Father Sebastian raised his hand and silence fell. Then his voice rang out, amplified by some trick of acoustics or magic.